Rachel, here with Ari, and we're your hosts for the Merry Writer podcast. This week, we're on episode 236, asking our guest, how do you run a successful book tour? Before we start, if you enjoy the show, consider checking out our coffee page. You can follow the page for free, as we have plenty of goodies for all. If you're feeling generous, a one-off donation will get you access to a few more treats, or you can become a Merry Writer for just $2 a month. For this, you'll get access to all the items in our shop, including exclusive goodies and access to bonus episodes, all while helping to support our podcast. But of course, if that's not your style and you still enjoy the show, then please subscribe wherever you're listening if you're not already, and consider dropping us a like.
Now, please help us welcome Ellie Harper to the show. Thank you so much for joining us. It's good to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure.
Awesome. Before we actually get into all the questions, would you like to tell everyone how many book tours you've actually done?
Okay, that is an interesting question. My tours have been somewhat nebulous. So my first, I guess, official book tour was back in 2016 in the UK with the original publisher of my first young adult fantasy series called the Shadow War Saga. So these are the books that I had been writing under my real name since I was 14 years old. And I found this publisher, and even though he was overseas, he was really enthusiastic about the book. So I went over there for, I want to say 2 months. I spent like an entire summer there. And we had the first book, Dragon Speaker, released. And I did several library events and several, festival events. And I went to a couple schools, actually. So that was, one was called the Pilton Infants School, but it was not for infants. It was like what we would consider, I guess, an elementary school. But that was really fun. I met a lot of kids, and they were very enthusiastic. Everybody was very enthusiastic, I guess, because I was an American overseas. So they thought that I was a bigger deal than I was, which ended up being not so much the case. The publisher, he was a smaller publisher, and I think he probably bit off more than he could chew, because my second book, I sent in the manuscript and it was like 170,000 words. So we parted ways amicably in early 2019. But because it had this history, because it had already been published overseas, it was difficult to get a publisher here in the States. So I brought the first book out in October 2019 myself. And I did a little book tour in and around New York, which is where I'm based. And my second book came out in 2020. And for that, wait, no, I messed up my years. Sorry, the pandemic got me. So I brought Dragon Speaker out in 2018. Then in 2019, I brought book 2 out. And for that, there we go, because this didn't happen in 2020. I'm just realizing. I actually secured a launch party at the Union Square Barnes & Noble, which is their flagship store and which is considered the biggest bookstore in the world. And whether or not that's a real claim, I think it's probably close, if not actually true, because it's humongous. But that was a struggle. That was like me going into this store personally with printed out materials about how I was going to run this event and what I'd done in the past and all my plans for it, and stalking down literally stalking the events manager. I don't know, maybe I shouldn't. Well, this is a funny story. So I would go in, and I have, pretty severe social anxiety. So I had identified who the events manager was, the person to whom I should speak. And I would ask the people at the front desk, hi, so-and-so in. And they would be like, yeah, he's upstairs. He's doing things around his office. And so I would go up, and I would stake out the door, and I would wait for him to come out. And then I would, spend 15, 20 minutes working up the courage to try to be like, hey, it's me again. I was just wondering about this event, possibly doing this event. And then finally, I caught their attention because I came in very well prepared. So I had all these materials, and I was persistent. So normally I don't think a store like that would have paid attention to someone like me, because I'm not Hillary Clinton or Michelle Obama, who they, host for their book launches, right? I'm not them. But I was prepared, and I told them I can guarantee them a minimum of 50 people showing up at the event. And I said I had all these cool ideas for like, we could run a raffle, and then I would have prizes, including printed out maps from my books and little plushies of my dragon characters from the books, and the grand prize of $100 Barnes & Noble gift card. So so I sort of did pay my way in some respect. But ultimately, we took it to an email conversation where we hammered out all the details, and then I had the event. And I did get a minimum of 50 people there, but it was like pulling eye teeth to get this off the ground. So after that, everything seemed a lot easier. And I also think that getting into that store and having that just as bragging rights opened up some doors for future Barnes and Nobles. So fast forward, quote unquote, post pandemic, back in 2023, which is last year. I'm now realizing it's just last year. I brought out a new book called Kill Your Darlings, which I published under the pen name L.E. Harper. And this, I had thought at the time, it was like, oh, this is the best book I've ever written. I'm so hyped about it. I'm gonna make this a success. So I, together with one of my writer friends, we contacted a lot of indie bookstores, but also several Barnes and Nobles around the Eastern Seaboard and into the Midwest. So we had this whole route planned out, because I was going to go down to visit her in Georgia, and then we were going to drive up to Chicago for the American Library Association conference. So we planned a whole bunch of stores along this way. And so I organized that back in 2023, and then we did another one. Now it's become kind of like, I want to say less official. Like every so often we'll just be like, I want to go back to Barnes & Noble. We should do some more Barnes & Noble events. And now we have good relationships with several of the stores, like very good relationships with several of the stores. I will say in her area, because the stores in New York are a little like, they're in New York. So like back in March of this year, I went down to Georgia for a month for a writing sabbatical. And during the week, my friend and I would encourage each other to write our next books. And on the weekends, we sort of just went to all these Barnes & Noble stores with whom we have very good relationships now. And so it's become a lot easier, I would say, as time goes on. The more stores we have under our belts, the more it's easier to reach out to new stores and say, hey, we have this good track record and we know what we're doing.
Can I just go back to what you said at the very beginning?
Yeah.
I'm actually shocked that you said that you got a publisher in the UK.
Yes.
But then when you took your rights back and went back looking for something in the US, that you actually found it harder. I would have thought, obviously I know nothing, I would have thought it would have been easier, because it's almost like, look, somebody professional has liked this, knows how good it is, and I'd have thought people would be more like, oh, okay, yeah, it's got a bit more of a, like I said, like almost like a track record to it.
That would be true if the sales reflected larger numbers than they did, to put it mildly. So again, this was my first book, and it was also one of this publisher's first books. And we both obviously put our all into it, and we did, I want to say, at least a dozen, if not a couple dozen events over the course of, that run with the first book. But it is a very difficult industry, and I didn't have a lot of sales data to point to. So I had very few online reviews, for example. So when I took the book back and brought it to publishers and agents here, they can only see how many sales there are. I can tell them I sold 100,000 books, but if the online presence doesn't reflect that, then they're going to be like, this person's full of it. If I had actually sold 100,000 copies, it would have been a very different story. But I didn't. And so people see that, and then it has the opposite effect. So they're like, oh, this was published and it didn't do well, so we don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah, got you. I think that's it. It just shows how unfortunately important it is regarding online presence and online data and reviews and everything. I mean, you said you could sell loads physical copies in shops. You could get people emailing you through the wazoo with how wonderful it is. But if they're not putting it online, no one's going to believe it.
And that's true. You know, I have QR codes in the backs of all my books now saying, hey, if you enjoyed this book, please consider leaving a review, and here's where you can do it. But that's like one of the most difficult things to get people to do. Even I'll sell hundreds of books during the course of a book tour in physical stores. But then, you know, the online algorithms don't reflect that sales data. Like if Amazon sees I sell 100 books in one day, then they're going to be like, oh, let's push this book out. But if they don't know that, and they also don't allow unverified reviews. So if somebody buys my book in a physical Barnes & Noble bookstore, they cannot, I actually don't know how it works. I'm very anti-Scamazon. I don't deal with them at all if possible. I avoid them at all costs. And so I really don't know how the back end works, but I know that I have not been able to rate books in the past because I am not a verified purchaser. I didn't buy it through their website. And also, I think they have some kind of rule that you have to spend a minimum of $40 to $50 a year to be able to write any kind of review, which I've never spent $1 on Scamazon of my own money. I once won a gift card, but that's a different story.
I gotta say, your story about the 2019 book tour, I mean, I'm just kind of blown away at how you just took matters into your own hand, and you really like staked that guy out and was like, this is something that I want to do and I'm prepared, and I'm not really going to take no for an answer because see, I've already done all the work. You don't have to do anything. I wouldn't even think to do half of that stuff, let alone actually, you know, work up the courage to go talk to a person in person. I would probably send an email and then be like, oh, they didn't respond, womp womp. Like, but seriously, good for you.
That is, I definitely went above and beyond for that store because specifically for the reason that they don't do events really with people like me. They will have famous people in that store. So this really was, you know, I put a lot of work into it as well to get this minimum of 50 people. I Facebook messaged everybody on my friends list. And I was like, hey, you know, long time no talk. I'd love it if you came to my book event in Union Square, New York City. And in the weekend preceding the event, I actually dressed up like a dragon. And I stood in Union Square holding a sign saying, do you like dragons? You know, and would engage passersby and say, and like give out little, you know, handwritten coupons saying, if you come to my event next week, present this to me. And when you buy a book, book 2 from Barnes & Noble, because they were hosting the release party, I said, I will give you a free copy of book 1 on my own. But of course, it being like, this was a great idea, I think, in theory. In practice, it's New York City. So I was just another, what we lovingly call CNYLs, Certified New York Loonies. And, you know, it didn't make much of an impression, I think, on the city folk. So, which is fine. I should have probably expected that, because if it were me and I saw a sign with saying, do you like dragons, I would approach the individual. But it being New York City, I might have some reservations because you never know what you're getting into. I could have really been a crazy person, you know, and I am. So good on them, you know, fair enough. I can't fault anyone. None of them came to my event, by the way, for the record. None
oh
of the
my God,
people
the fact you did it is amazing.
That's such a unique idea. We talk about marketing, we talk about things you can try, because obviously there's so many things that they say about marketing, and I have never come up with anyone ever saying dress up like, you know, a creature or a monster or a character from your book and hand out coupons. That just that is like one for the like ages. It's completely out of left field, and I love it. And I'm actually frustrated that none of these people took you up on it.
Well, again, it is New York. I suspect if I were in literally anywhere else in the world, I might have had a better turnout. So I did this one, even in San Francisco. I did not an event, but it was an event, but it was just dragons, not books. And I dressed up, obviously, as I cosplayed as one of the dragonish characters from the game, the dragon game, for which I was invited to be there. And as I'm walking from my hotel to the event, people just kind of stopped me and were like, "Can we take a picture with you?" And that would never happen in New York, never, ever. It might if the person you're interacting with is on a similar level of, I don't want to use the word craziness, but craziness. I think I can do that because I am a crazy person. I can say that word. I own that term. So, and I own it proudly.
But in New York, it's like, just don't look, don't make eye
Yeah,
contact.
in New York, it's like, somebody's trying to sell you something. If anyone approaches you on the sidewalk, they want your money. So I think if I did it, I think if somebody else were to try it somewhere that is not New York City, if you have the gumption to do it, I believe it would yield some results, because that's not something you see elsewhere necessarily. If I did this in Georgia, if I walked into a Starbucks and wearing a dragon costume and handed out coupons to a book event to the Augusta Barnes and Noble, I bet people would show up.
But I mean, that's the thing. It's such a unique idea. And I mean, yeah, you got to be in the right mindset to approach somebody like that. And there is a certain level that you have to reach, but still, like, I mean, that's so cool. And I love it. I love it so much. But now earlier you did say that once you do one book tour, they kind of get easier to streamline the more you do after that. So I'm just going to throw this out there. What exactly is the process and timeline to set up a book tour?
Yes. So now that I had this first big Barnes and Noble event under my belt, I figured I might as well start reaching out to other Barnes and Nobles. Because I think when you're an independently published author, some people are like, "How did you do that? How did you get into Barnes and Noble?" And ultimately, it's not that hard. They are very willing to have authors come in and do an event. Again, in theory. In practice, you have to prove to them that you are also worth their time. So what I do now to make the decision so easy for them is, first, I will, if I'm planning a book tour, like let's say I'm actually in the process of planning a book tour for late September, early October for the release of my new novel, Dragon Ascendant. And so what I'll do is I will identify the route that I'm going to take. So it starts, I'm going upstate to visit a friend, and then I'm going over to Pennsylvania to visit another friend, and then I'm going down to Delaware to visit a third friend, and then I'm ultimately going to make my way down to Georgia to visit my original friend. So I will go on the Barnes and Noble website, and I will look up stores in the area on my route. And then I will call the stores first, just to say that I did it, even though 99, maybe even 100% of the time, what they'll say to you on the phone is, "Please email us." And ordinarily I would just email them because I also have extreme phone anxiety. Haha, I don't like talking on the phone. So I write myself a little script. I have it here on my desktop. I'll open it up whenever I'm on the phone with one of these stores, and I'll say, "Hi, my name is Ilana Mugden." That's my real name. I was wondering if your store does author events and if there might be someone I could talk to about possibly arranging them. So I've introduced myself, and they will refer me to their email, and I will ask them, is there someone to whom I should address the email? Because personalization always helps, right? Think of it as querying. If you're querying an agent or a publisher, you don't want to write just "Dear Agent." You want to write "Dear so-and-so" to show that you actually care a little bit and you did some of your research at least. So I'll get the name of the person to whom I should address the email, and then I will go in and I'll write. I have my little email scripted out, and I send it out, and I personalize it to the store, obviously, and to the person. And then whichever stores get back to me, I start planning my route around those. And again, going back to the querying metaphor, you really do have to look at it like you look at querying. You don't just send out 1 or 2 queries to the people you hope will say yes. At least I don't. I send out queries even to long shots, because you really never know. Like this Barnes & Noble, Union Square Barnes & Noble was such a long shot, but I got it. So I will identify the stores I want. And some of them, sometimes it's just like they're busy and they have a billion people in their emails and they don't get back to you in a timely fashion. So maybe a event doesn't work out. But so far we've booked several stores along this route already. So it's coming together nicely.
No, that's great. But I mean, the other thing is too, like, even if you don't expect them to respond or if you don't expect them to say yes, you're still getting your name out there and you're still saying, hey, I exist. And then maybe down the line, whenever you release another book, whether it's like your next book or 5 books from now, you can reach out to them again and they'll be like, oh, this person sounds familiar. And they can look you up and see all the other stuff you've done. And that'll increase your chances of them saying, yes, we'd love to host your author event here.
That is definitely true. It helps. Obviously, in my email, I've done dozens of Barnes & Noble events throughout America. So that's one of the buzzwords, I would say, that tells them right off the bat, this isn't my first rodeo. I know what I'm doing. And I'll also write in the email, typically I set up a table near the door and I engage customers as they come in, because one mistake a lot of authors make is that they will just sit at their book booth and just kind of wait for people to come to them, and that's really not how it works. Certainly not in New York City, but also really not anywhere else. It is one of the hardest things in the world to get people to care about something that they don't know about, truly. So what we do, or what I do, is I dress up for my events. So right off the bat, I'm a spectacle. Usually I will have my pet rescue snake Medusa with me, because that's a draw. People walk into a Barnes & Noble, they expect to see books. They don't necessarily expect to see a little snake. So they come over and we talk about Medusa, and now I've established a rapport, and then I can talk about my books. And I think it's very important to mention, just from a book selling standpoint, never push the customer. I usually ask them first, do you like fantasy? And if the answer is yes, I'll say, do you like dragons? If the answer is yes, then I'll specify further, do you like dragons and depression? If the answer is yes, then I'll pitch them Kill Your Darlings. And if the answer is no, I'll pitch them the Shadow War Saga books. And I will hand them a book and I will let them look at it. And that's it. I pitch the book and I let the book either sell itself or not. If they say no thanks, I say, thanks anyway for stopping by. Here, have a sticker, have a snake sticker, take a picture with Medusa, whatever. That's no skin off my nose, and it makes the interaction, because I'm not a salesman, really. So this is all outside of my wheelhouse if I were left to my natural state. But now I have done this so many times that I have a script and I have my little pitch memorized and I know how to address people. And yeah, I'm never pushy. So I kind of went off on a tangent. I don't remember what the original question was, but I thought that was an important point to mention. Don't push your books on the customers. The book will sell itself.
It's all good information regardless. I mean, I don't even remember what the original question was either, but you're all saying good stuff. So, I mean, I'm just letting you roll with it. It's because I'm learning a lot.
Okay, good. I do vaguely remember I was talking about emails and what I put in the emails to get the Barnes & Nobles to pay attention and let them know that I'm experienced and that I'm not going to be a waste of their time and that I'm actually going to sell them some books, or sell some books for them rather. And the last thing I do, and this is really a personal author decision whether or not you do this, but I tell them, since I'm independently published, I provide my own books on consignment. And what that means is the store will not buy my books, I will bring books. And so it's free money for them, right? Because they get a 40% cut. I pay them 40% of whatever profits I make for the privilege of using their space. But then this is all free money for them. So if I sell 20 books, that's a good day for both of us. So really, if you say to Barnes and Nobles, like, on consignment, there's almost no reason why they should say no, because it literally is free money. Sometimes if the person is on tried, I think they might say, maybe, because again, they don't want, it's still a little bit of time to, do social media graphics and advertise the event and set up the table and do all that stuff and have the author sign a consignment form and then have them come in and just sit behind the desk and sell no books. It's no loss monetarily for Barnes and Noble, but it's time invested. So they do their business. End stage capitalist society that we live in. So everybody wants to know that their investment is going to pay off. Now, the reason I always do this is just because I find it easier, number one, but also number two, because I am independently published through Ingram Spark, I can set my own wholesale discount prices and I can set the returnability of my books. So back in the day, this is to encourage bookstores to order your book through Ingram and to stock it physically in their stores, which realistically for someone like me is not going to happen because I am not Chloe Gong. I am not Michelle Obama, I'm not that guy. They don't know who I am off the top of their head. They don't know to look for my books. So for me, it's not worth it putting it at a huge wholesale discount and allowing the books to be returnable. But if you want stores to ever actually order your books online, they require a 55% wholesale discount, which means you're giving them more than half off your book to incentivize them so that they can actually make a profit if your book sells. And your book must be returnable. And not only just returnable, but also destroyable. And what that means is returnable, that's pretty straightforward. You can return your book if you don't like it for whatever reason, right? Destroyable means once the customer returns the book, the retailer can choose what to do with it. So if the book has sold some copies, then they might decide, okay, we'll put it back on the shelf, whatever. But if the book is not doing so well, then they can literally destroy it. They throw it away. They put it in the dumpster. They rip it up. Whatever they do, because shelf space in the store is a high commodity. It's a real commodity. If you have a book that you keep on the shelf and it doesn't ever sell, that is space being eaten up by something that could be devoted to a book that does sell. It all boils down to the money in the end. And once upon a time, I did want to incentivize stores, and I had all my books set at 55% wholesale discount, returnable, destroyable. And then this is a funny story. It's not a funny story, but so much time has passed that I can laugh at it. Not really. It's very painful, actually, to talk about. So rewind to 2019, Union Square, Barnes and Noble. They were going to order my books because back then I had them all at the biggest discount and they were returnable, destroyable. So there's no reason for Barnes and Noble not to order my books, right? And I said, I can guarantee you a minimum of 50 people. And they say, okay, we'll order 100 books. And to me, that sounded great. I was like, fantastic. Come to the day of the event, they have actually ordered 250 books total. So I was like, yeah, we're rolling in it. Oh, this is so great. I made so much money. Psych, because I didn't sell 250 books. So what Barnes & Noble can do is they can return it to Ingram Spark because it is returnable, destroyable. So they get their money back. Barnes & Noble gets their money back. But guess who's on the hook monetarily for all those returned books? Me. That was very upsetting. So after that, I decided I am not going to make my books returnable and destroyable anymore. And again, I made this decision. This is a decision that every author has to make independently, because it's a business decision. But for me, I'm like, realistically, I don't make enough bookstore sales to, like, online bookstore sales, right? They don't order my books and stock my books in the store. They're not going to do that even if I have all these incentives. So it's really not worth me allowing the books to be returnable when somebody can just buy it off Scamazon and then read it and then say, yeah, Scamazon allows me to return this book, so I'm going to return it. And then I have to pay for that book. I'm on the hook monetarily for that. So to me, that's not worth it. To everybody is different. For some people, it might be because they always want to have that ability to go to a bookstore and say, you can order my books. There's no reason not to, because you get a big discount and they're returnable and they're destroyable. So you're not on the hook for them. But for me, it's just much easier to approach a Barnes & Noble and say, I will provide you my books on consignment, because at the end of the day, if none of them sell, then they all come home with me and I can sell them elsewhere. I can sell them on my Ko-fi shop. I can sell them on TikTok, whatever. I can sell them at the next event, theoretically. So that's why I make that decision.
That is incredible. I had never even thought about the concept of consignment books or return and destroy. I mean, these are things that have never, ever crossed my mind when I've ever thought about in the future book tours. So we've already learned so much more than we ever would have, because I don't think I've ever seen anything about that written on any article about book tours. And since you mentioned consignments, that actually leads us really nicely into the second question, which is, what supplies should you or would you bring to do when you do your book tours that you think actually helps?
Obviously, if you are going to sell your books on consignment, you bring books. That's kind of necessity. And then any marketing and promo materials. Like I have a large stand-up banner that I'll put in or near the doorway of a store that says, come meet author L.E. Harper. And it has a picture of the book cover, Kill Your Darlings, and it has some nice quotes about the book that would hopefully incentivize people to come over. Does it help? Hard to say. People being people, I think 95% of them walk right past the banner and don't even clock that it's there. And you'd be surprised how many people come up to me standing behind this book desk selling this book and saying, are you the author? No, I do this for fun. Which is true, I do, but I am the author. And I can even have signs saying, meet the author, and it doesn't fully register. So, and I don't blame them, because honestly, if I think about it, would I do the same thing? Absolutely. What am I paying attention to when I walk into a store? Literally not anything around me. I'm going to do my thing. I know which shelf I'm going to. I know which book I want or which cafe drink I'm going to indulge in. And I have no, spatial awareness. So I can't blame anyone for that. But for that 5% who might be more visually aware of their surroundings, I think banners are never a bad thing to have. So I have this one stand-up banner and I have a table banner. That's just something they can see, good quotes about the book. And it's got some dragony things on it, and it dresses up the table nicely. I have a nice black stretchy tablecloth, which we can put over whatever tables they set up for us, and we hide our boxes under it, so we look nice and clean, professional. Any decorations, and going back to promo materials, so to incentivize people to buy books when they're in the store, I bring goodies, so I say you can get a signed, personalized copy from me, obviously, because I'm there and I'm the author. But you can also get all these cool little stickers. So I have all these dragon stickers printed and these character stickers printed for my new book, Dragon Ascendant. So I have like an Isidro sticker and a Syl sticker. And sometimes I just have more generic stickers. Like I have one that says bookworm with a YRM. WYRM, and it's a little dragon reading a book about dragons. You know, so these are just cute little things that, and I put them out on the table for people to see, that they get cool little extra goodies when they get this book. And that, I think, in addition to them, you know, really liking the book product, that can sometimes be the tipping point between, I'll get this one instead of the book I specifically came in here to get, right? Or in addition to. And I will say this, it's actually, if you engage people in a bookstore and you start with the right script, because I start with, do you like dragons? If the answer is no, I said, cool, have a good one. Enjoy your books or your drinks or whatever it is. If the answer is yes, then we already have some common ground. And they'll probably, I can guarantee that if they like dragons, they will like my books on some level, at least on a draconic level. So, you know, if they're already like at the point where this looks like a really cool book, throw in some stickers and they're sold. You know, like it's you are selling to your audience being people who like books. Everyone who comes into that store is part of your potential audience. And you never know who's going to like your book and who's not. So in the past, because my series is young adult, I would engage more people who seemed like they would probably like my book, you know, so like younger generation, maybe they have a teenager with them, because that's my audience, really, the teenager. And if their mom's with them, then mom's going to buy the book, right? But I have had people from all walks of life, super unexpected. I've had octogenarians come over and talk to me, and one of these individuals, he didn't even like dragons, but he's like, I really want to support local authors, and I love collecting signed books, so I would like to buy a copy of your book. So, you know, like, don't stereotype people, I guess, is the life lesson here, which is a lesson that you should apply to every area of life. And perhaps I was foolish to, you know, only go after people who I thought were my target demographic. But that's the thing, publishers make a big deal about target demographics because they do their advertising to target the people who are most likely to buy their books. And for them, it's like $1 billion industry. For me, it doesn't hurt to approach somebody who looks like totally not my, like, middle-aged cishet white man, not really my target demographic, but I'll engage him nonetheless because maybe he has a kid, maybe he likes dragons, maybe he plays D&D, I don't know. You never know. You cannot judge a book by its cover, unless it's my book, in which case people always judge books by their covers.
Part of the thing about writing a book is that, yeah, you do want to engage your targeted audience, but you also want to bring new readers to your genre and to your particular story too. It's a whole community. It's not just like segregated communities. You want to be able to expand your reach. And I got to say, I am so impressed at how outside the box you go for these book tours. Like, it's amazing.
I'm very desperate. That's I think that's what it boils down to.
No, you're not desperate. You're a hard worker. Oh my God. And you really believe in yourself and your books. And that is saying a lot. And it really shows. And I'm just curious, where exactly, you said that you get like a table banner and you get a poster for the outside and stuff. Where do you get do you make them yourself, or do you get them from some place?
No, actually there's oh gosh, and now I can't remember the name of the site, but there is, you can just Google, and this is how I found the site, because I'm, you know, a poor person, right on the poverty line. And so whenever I'm looking for materials, I start with Googling cheapest XYZ. So I will look for cheap stand-up banners, cheapest table banners, whatever. And Google will present me with some results, and I will look at all the first page and sometimes part of the second page results. And I will determine which is actually the cheapest, but also for the best quality. Like sometimes there are, you can get table banners from Vistaprint, and that's decent quality, but it's much more expensive than the place I used, which was still fantastic quality, and they were having like this huge sale. So a 5-foot stand-up banner, the thing that I put in the doorway of Barnes and Nobles, ended up being like, plus shipping, it was like $90. And the shipping was $30, by the way, because they have to send you, they package the stand of this thing, and it's a whole big schmagegi. You have to set it up, and so there's a lot of materials that go into it, and the stand itself is made out of aluminum, which I guess is cheap now that I think about it, but whatever. So like that was a really good deal. I would have had to pay $200 to get a comparable product from Vistaprint. So I was happy with my purchase, and I also ended up getting a table banner from them, a little small, 18-inch table banner, and the quality on that was pretty good too. And the print quality was very nice. It was clean, crisp, bright colors. So, for the money I paid, I thought it was well worth the investment.
That's interesting though, because Vistaprint is like the only one that I've really heard of. I don't know too many others, but it's a really smart move to Google cheapest. Before doing that, I never really thought to add those little extra keywords. But that's a good idea.
Always add cheap.
Yeah, well, yeah, you have to. I mean, as indie authors, I mean, we're throwing so much of our own money into these passion projects that you gotta do what you gotta do. So when you get these promotional materials, like for the actual book tour, what are some other promotional materials that you get to market the actual upcoming book tour? Like, what's the best way to market for it?
Really all we can do in this day and age is social media posts, alerting people. And I should actually get on that for my upcoming tour. So I will make posts on Instagram and TikTok, which are the only places I'm active now. Twitter being the dumpster fire it currently is. Rest in peace. We lost a real one. So I'll make things saying, hey, I'm going to be at such and such Barnes and Noble on this date and time. We'd love it if you joined us. And I put the same thing on TikTok, and I'll make, a nice little fun video about it. And for TikTok, I've found, the book talk community, I hate TikTok personally, as a concept. I think it kind of represents one of the low points of humanity. However, that being said, the book talk and the author talk communities on the platform are so engaged and so supportive and encouraging. And I have found so many wonderful people through TikTok. And so when I post, I actually do get engagement from TikTok, and I get people saying, oh, you're coming to my city. I'm gonna be there. And I have had people come and show up to these events. I have had people drive 3 hours to show up to an event from TikTok. So it pains me to say it, but TikTok really does work. And I am very grateful that it does. And so I do, my little social media postings, and that's kind of really all that you can do. Like I'm not going to do every door direct mailing campaigns or something like that, which is common in the real estate business. And I know because I used to work as an indentured servant at a real estate office, where they'll just get from the post office, they'll get the roots of, or the addresses of every single house in a neighborhood, and they'll send out a flyer to every single one of those houses. Like if I really wanted to be enterprising, I could do that in my neighborhood, but I do not think for the cost it would result in very many sales. I would not break even. So there's really not a lot you can do in terms of like actual promotion outside of the online world. But I will say this, a vast majority of my sales come from random people I don't know and who don't know me, because I'm talking to everyone who comes in. And unless they've specifically seen me on TikTok and made the decision, like, I'm going to come to this event to meet this author, they have no idea who I am. And yet, if they like dragons, and if they like dragons and depression, we already have so much in common. Oh, and they also like books. So we have, 3 huge things in common. And it's really not difficult to make a sale if you are actually engaging with them as a person. I think it's important to note, you shouldn't view them as just a customer. This is a person like you who's walking into a bookstore to buy books, and you want to make the case to them that your book is worth buying. So you approach it like, what do you like? What kind of things do you like? You like dragons? Cool. You like depression? Sick. You like this kind of trope? That's what's up. My book has all of that. So, and then they make the decision, like, is it worth it to spend the $15 for them? And they say, sometimes it's like really easy. Sometimes they'll just come right up and they'll see the cover and they're like, I want this book. Sometimes it takes a longer time. Sometimes they're like, can I take this and read the first chapter? And I say, absolutely. No skin off my nose. And then either they'll bring it back and they'll say, yes, I want it, or sometimes they'll leave it in the store and then we have to, they'll put it down somewhere because they think they're being more polite that way. But then we have to do a panicked search at the end of the night because my numbers don't add up with Barnes and Noble's numbers. So we have had to go on some adventures around the store after hours to find missing copies. Unfortunately, they always turn up. But that's a caveat, I would say. Be careful when your books walk away.
I do like that though, because I could see why people would feel embarrassed coming back going, no, it's not for me.
I honestly, I would do that too. I would not want to go back to the person, like, because social anxiety. I can't imagine what it would be like for a normal person. For me, it would be unbearable. I couldn't do it. So I have great sympathy for these people, but sometimes it does cause problems.
I have to say, I really like that thing that you said about that you put the desk at the table right near the door and you engage people, because Rachel and I have really bad anxiety as well. And I find it very difficult to approach people first, especially if there's somebody else at the table, you can kind of sort of like edge close and then while they're chatting, you can have a look. But if there's nobody there, I'd feel weird just straight up to someone. But if they say something first, and obviously if they've got a snake, that's definitely going to pull me in. Then I'm there. But so that's a really interesting thing that I would never have considered, because I would be like, I can't say anything. What if I'm annoying someone? Oh my God, what if I say the wrong thing? And so that leads me nicely. Look at this. Look how good we're doing with segues today, Rach. On to what tips do you have for authors who are setting up their very first book tour? Because I'll be honest, everything you've said so far is things I would never have even considered. So I'm like, okay, I need to shed loads of notes right now.
I think I've probably covered all my biggest tips. The biggest one being, think of it as if it really is your first time, think of it as a querying process. If you reach out to, and literally during the 2023 summer book tour, I reached out to probably 100 indie bookstores and also Barnes and Nobles on the route. And of those, maybe 20 got back to me. And so that's what I would consider, like a partial request, right, from an agent. And then about 10, we agreed, or 10 said that they were super interested in an event. That's like a full request. And then sometimes for whatever reason, it doesn't work out, like schedule wise, I can only be there on XYZ day. I'm just passing through the city on like a random Tuesday and they don't really do events on Tuesdays. So it doesn't work out for whatever reason. So ultimately the things you book, those are like the offers. And when you book the book event. So don't be discouraged, I think, by people ignoring you or people saying we don't do events and whatever, like that's fine. That's their prerogative. Just like it's an agent's prerogative to say, this is really not for me. Best of luck in the future. So that's, I guess, tip number one. And then tip number two is whenever you do approach these stores, to give yourself the best chance of them not only writing back, but saying yes to an event, really let them know that you know what you're doing. Because again, if you go in and you just sit there, it's not really successful for anyone. Not the bookstore and not you, because you want to sell books. This is why you're doing it. writing things in the email like the way I do, where I say, this is how I've operated in the past. Like I set up a table near the door and I just engage customers as they come in. That tells them off the bat, okay, number one, she knows, like she's done this before. And number two, she's not expecting a larger event. Like sometimes Barnes and Nobles do, like the Union Square Barnes and Noble event was, they had me up on a stage. I read an excerpt at the podium from my book. I did a Q&A session. And then I had people come up in a line and I signed books for them. And that's a whole big thing that some stores don't even have the physical space for. But then they hear the word event and they're like, what is this person expecting to do? What kind of event are they talking about? You know? And so this tells the store it's not even really an event. It's just me like standing in your doorway and trying to sell books. So it's no problem for you, really. You want to make it as easy for them as possible. And then I also, obviously I've mentioned this before, but I tell them that I would bring my books on consignment. So that just makes it easier for them to say, okay, well, we don't lose any money by buying books from an unknown entity. And if this person sells books, then we make free money. Even if it is your first time, I would say, you know, using these techniques shows that you have at least done your research and you both know what to expect going into the event. And then hopefully it will be a success. And then once you have the first one under your belt, then it becomes exponentially easier as time goes on to get the next one and the next one. Because you can point to, I've done events here, here, and here at these Barnes and Nobles.
Going back to the consignment books, actually, just because you mentioned that, how many would you think to bring? Because I don't know, I'd be like, they're going, I'm going to take 500 and then not need them, or I'll take 20 and then they all sell out and you're like, oh, I've run out of books. What is your number that you, I mean, obviously I appreciate you have several different books out and you have been doing this a while, but what would you do if it was your first? How many would you think to bring just to be safe?
That is a very difficult question to answer, because even now I will bring different amounts of books. If I am on the road and I'm, you know, this upcoming book tour, if I'm going upstate to one Barnes and Noble and then to Pennsylvania for 2 more Barnes and Nobles and to Delaware for 2 more Barnes and Nobles, then I'm going to have to order a ton of books, like 100 to 200 books, and just have them in the car with me as I go and sell whatever sells. And I will say this, it is, if you're only doing a one event, it's much better. Well, I guess, okay. I was going to say it's better to sell out than to have too many books, because then you have, you know, if you're ordering 200 books just for one event and you only sell 20, then you have 100 and whatever books, I can't do the math, left over sitting around in your house. And you're responsible for those. So you either have to do more events, which is more work, or you have to sell them online somehow, which is not a guarantee. So, and I don't like to have books sitting around in my room because it makes me feel anxious. It's like, you need to be sold and I'm not doing anything to sell you and I'm a failure at life and I hate myself. So me personally, I think I always probably underbuy, also because, as I mentioned, I'm poor. Buying books, even your own books from Ingram for whatever wholesale price is expensive. I just put in an order for 40 copies of Dragon Ascendant and, you know, 2 copies a piece of each of my Shadow War Saga books, because I already have like 20 copies of Dragon Speaker. And typically if people are buying those books, they'll just buy the first one. But it's nice to have copies of books 2 through 5 also on the table, so that in the off chance that they want to buy all 5, they can. And this order cost me like $500. You know, so like it's insane. But hopefully I make that money back. And again, you never know. I went to, I guess it was Columbia, South Carolina Barnes and Noble. And I had my Shadow War Saga books with me, but I was really just selling Kill Your Darlings. Like I was promoting Kill Your Darlings at that time. So that was my specific thing. And so I told them, I'm like, let's not even do consignment forms for these guys. I'm not even gonna give you the ISBNs, because then it's a whole big thing and they're not gonna sell. And then 2 people came in and they bought, both of them bought sets of all 5. And then a third person wanted a set of all 5, and I had sold out because I didn't expect this. So I put my foot in my mouth in a big way, in a good way, but I was like, I just created more problems for all of us by doing that.
Well, I mean, that's just it. You don't realize what's a huge investment it is to not only just, I mean, when people think of selling books, they think, oh, I'm going to make money. I'm going to make a quick buck and I'll just write an ebook and it's that simple. But it really isn't. I mean, even just to order a proof copy of your book, you have to pay for that. And a lot of people don't realize that it is an investment. And to bring that many books, that's a lot of physical labor too. I mean, let's be real.
It is. And, I really go ham. Like, I have access to a car, so I'm lucky that I can go all over the planet doing this stuff. Some people just have one local Barnes and Noble that they have a good relationship with. My friend in Delaware. It's Wendy. You know her, Wendy Simpson.
Yes, yeah.
Oh my God.
Wendy Simpson. She's been on the podcast before.
Yes. Okay. I'm so stupid. Okay. So she has good relationships with the 2 Barnes and Nobles in her area. And she's a more legitimate person than I am. So they buy her books and they stock the books in the store. And she'll come in every so often and she'll do an event with them and she'll sell out and it's great. And she could just kind of like go to her local place. And if you create a good relationship with your local store, then you don't have to traipse all over the country. You can just keep going there as long as they don't get tired of you. Then, as long as you make them money, then they won't say no. Really. And she makes them money. She sells out every book event she does.
Wow. But see, that's the other thing too. You guys recognize that they are doing you guys a favor. And you realize that you have to be the one to put the work in. You can't just reach out to these places to host you for a book event and then expect them to do X, Y, and Z for you. You realize that, you reach out to them and they give the okay and they give you the space. And that's kind of the extent of what they'll do for you. You got to do everything else. And it's a lot of work. And I think that's something else that a lot of people don't realize.
Now, I will say this, for every Barnes & Noble I've worked with, the staff, again, these are just individual people. This is not the corporation. So once you get in the door, the staff, without exception, have always been wonderful. They are so nice. They're oftentimes very accommodating. Some of them have been like, do you want anything from the cafe? And I'll go over like trying to pay for it. And then they'll be like, no, have it. And it's, it's just like such generosity of spirit that they don't have to do at all, especially not for people like me. Like if it was Michelle Obama, I would give her the cafe, that would be no charge for you. If you want a latte, it's on the house. But if it's me, I go in expecting to pay and I go in expecting to do my own work. But I think that attitude also in turn engenders a spirit of generosity from the reciprocating party. So they see that I am ready and willing to work and I make an effort to get to know the staff and I'm friendly toward them and I'm helpful and I set up my own table and my own display most of the time. So then you're making friends with these people and that's how you create a good working relationship.
With that, I think that's kind of a good segue into our final question before we wrap this up. And you kind of already talked about this a little bit. What is something major that you've learned from your first book tour that you would improve upon going forward?
I think, I'll circle back to the point I mentioned earlier, which is to never assume who your audience is. So, for example, don't just talk to younger people or parents if you're selling a young adult book. Because you really never know what people will like. And certain people are just genre fanatics, so they'll be older and they'll still read young adult or middle grade books. And that's perfectly fine because everyone has different tastes. Or perhaps it's a middle grade book and this person wouldn't necessarily read a middle grade book or even a young adult book, but it is fantasy. And they really like fantasy. Or if they really like dragons, they might just buy the book because okay, I like dragons, So you can never tell who walking through that door is going to buy your book and who's not. and you're never going to know unless you first engage them. So don't be afraid. And this is like an insane thing to say, but don't be afraid to talk to strangers is my advice for book tours. Because me personally, I am very afraid to talk to anybody. I have real big social problems. So all of this, I will reiterate, all of this is very far outside my wheelhouse. I am, despite what the evidence in this recording may suggest, I am not an extrovert. I am a writing depressed gremlin who sits in my room with the lights out, lying face down on the floor, thinking about my poor life choices. That's my baseline. That's my natural habitat. None of this is natural to me. So don't be afraid to go outside your comfort zone. Don't be afraid to engage people as they come in. What's the worst they can say? Do you like dragons? No. Okay. You have poor taste, but have a good day, whatever. And don't be afraid of rejection, because even if the answer is I love dragons, you know, sometimes, a lot of the time they're like, well, I came in to buy one book and it's not for me, and this is all I have the budget for, and that's perfectly fine. Okay, great. And sometimes I'll say you can scan the QR code if you want to, you know, read, like Dragon Speaker is a perma-free book. I just have the ebook available for free online, which is a relic from the pandemic. And actually, in terms of marketing, pandemic hit, and in early 2020, my third book in the series was coming out, Dragon Blood. And I was thinking at the time, I was like, my third book's going to come out. I did the second book at Barnes & Noble in Union Square. I'm going to go back to them and it's going to be even better. Psych, no. So I didn't do anything. This book kind of just came out on its release day without fanfare. Nobody cared. I didn't care. And so I just, the first 3 books in the series, they were all out. And so I just made them free in ebook format on every major platform, because I use an aggregator to distribute my ebooks. So I'm not just exclusive to Scamazon. I'm on there, obviously, but I also get distributed to Barnes & Noble, and Google Play, and Apple Books, and Kobo, and Rakuten, and all these other things. Places you wouldn't even think of, like Target, I don't know, Walmart. But so I just made the books free everywhere, because I was like, okay, well, everyone's suffering financially. So now and everybody's quarantining, or I thought so. Spoiler alert, they didn't. But I was like, here's something for them to read in quarantine, whatever. And I left it alone, and whatever. And like 3 or 4 months later, I came back to the Scamazon pages, and I had gotten like 200 plus verified reviews for the first book, and 150, 160 verified reviews for the second and third ones. Which, did I make any money on those sales? No, but that was worth its weight in gold as a marketing strategy, because now it looks like 20,000 people bought my book, which they did. I had like 80,000 people or 100,000 people cumulatively across those 3 books download copies of my books. And that's nothing to sneeze at, number one. But number 2, reviews are so helpful. And I would never have gotten that if I hadn't just done this thing. So nobody really wants to hear like, make your books free if you want to do some marketing promo. But what's the alternative to that is paying Scamazon to run ads or run a promotion, which, by the way, does not guarantee sales. And unless you've written some kind of, I don't know, I want to say like fae erotica, you're not necessarily going to get people clicking on your advert. Like, people are not going to click on Kill Your Darlings. You're not going to click on the depression one. They're going to click on steamy smut fairy prince forbidden romance one. So like, be realistic about your marketing goals. You don't want to pay Scamazon $200 and make 0 sales, because that is always a possibility. But you can make your book free, and then you don't lose any money. And you might be like me, you might get 200 verified reviews, and that is so helpful.
You are so right about all of that. And yeah, it totally does sound backwards to keep your, like, release your books out for free, but it helps and it just gets your name out there, which is great. And I know, you know, we can't say that you're paid in exposure and all of that, but it does help in certain cases and in some instances. And ultimately, yeah, you just got to do what's best for you and your books. And I think that's great that when the pandemic hit, you said, how can I help with this? I'll give people reading material for free. I think that's amazing.
So, and then I discovered, quite by accident, I discovered that this works well. It's a marketing strategy. So
yeah, see, that's all you can ask for. And I think some of the best marketing strategies or some of the best things in anything is just when it happens accidentally, because you're not expecting anything. You don't have any hopes, and then there's no, like, you know, disappointment or anything. You're just pleasantly surprised.
yeah, I was absolutely not expecting this. So I guess going back to what would I learn that I would improve upon going forward, you know, I think that ties into it as well, is don't assume any marketing strategy is better or worse than any other. Don't assume that just because people are people, they're not going to pay attention to your door banners. Sometimes for the 1% who see, oh, look, there's an author, I'm going to go check it out. That's worth it. That's potentially a slightly easier sale. Everything has its purpose.
Well, you know what? I think that was a great thing to leave our listeners with. So before we go, did you want to share anything about yourself with them?
Yeah, I guess I should say my real name. I don't know if I actually even mentioned it. So my real name is Ilana Mugden, and my 10th novel, Dragon Ascendant, is coming out this October. And so that is a spin-off of my main series, the Shadow War Saga, which I've referenced several times. Dragon Speaker being the first one, Dragon Child being the one that I launched at the Union Square Barnes & Noble, Dragon Blood being the pandemic baby that, but then ultimately magically got me like 500 cumulative reviews. And I am a New York-based author and screenwriter, and I live a quiet but eccentric life with my pet rescue snake, Medusa, who has become my book mascot. She's my little bookworm. She comes with me to events, and usually I don't even warn the people ahead of time. Usually I just kind of go in and I'm like, how do you feel about snakes? And they'll be like, oh, I mean, I guess they're okay. And I'm like, because I have a snake. She can come out of her box and help make sales. So she is my mascot, and she gives me the strength to be extroverted. And I like dragons a lot, and I guess that's it. That's all there is to know about me.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for joining us on the podcast. This was a really, really great conversation, and you are just amazing. I was laughing. You have such a charismatic personality, despite what you say about your social anxiety, and it's just amazing. I learned a lot. All of Ellie Harper's links will be in the description below if you would like to go check out her work, and please do, because she's amazing. In the meantime, we will turn it over to you guys. Have you ever set up a book tour for yourself, or have you attended one before? And if so, how did it go? Let us know your answers in the comments so we can chat. And before we leave, if you want to learn more about us, the podcast, and opportunities to be a guest on the show, don't forget to check out our Podbean website at themerrywriterpodcast.podbean.com. Remember, we release a new episode every Wednesday. Next week, we're discussing the benefits of having guests on your blog. To ensure you don't miss it, hit the subscribe button on your way out. As always, thank you for listening to the Merry Writer Podcast. We'll see you guys next week. This podcast is brought to you by Reams of Paper. We're killing trees. The music titled Inspired is by Kevin MacLeod, licensed under Creative Commons 4.0.